Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I have such a wonderful guest for you tonight. Welcome, Katy McFee.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, we're going to talk about a really important topic tonight, which is women in tech, women in leadership, women in senior roles, the challenges that women face in business in general, because Katy is founder of Insights to Action, and she actually helps close the leadership gender gap and help women thrive as leaders. What could be more important than that? So great to have you here, Katy, and we're going to get straight into it.
Awesome. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, but before we do, love to just hear a little bit about you and your history. So what brought you to this place that you're in today, and what made you found Insights to Action?
Yeah. So I never planned to start my own company. That was never my goal. My whole career, I wanted to be a VP sales. So my first job, I came in and I was like, VP sales, that's what I want to do. And so I was in the corporate world for 18 years. Don't let my youthful appearance fool you. Um, and and I worked in tech primarily, so biotech and then sort of SaaS tech, so very male dominated. And my journey to finally reaching VP sales, and then I became an EVP sales, was really challenging. So I struggled with that transition from manager to director to VP. I felt really isolated. I felt really alone. I didn't feel like there was a lot of resources available to me. And I didn't find a lot of mentors available to me, especially as a woman and as a mom of young kids.
Yeah.
And so eventually I became an EVP and I checked everything off my list. But I really felt like there was something more I wanted to do. And I started to observe the women around me, the women reporting to me, or the women that maybe I was mentoring on the side, struggling with the same things I was and hitting the same plateaus that I hit. And so I thought, I think what I'm meant to do is launch my own business and try to help these women to make that sort of leap. I call it a chasm, right, to senior leadership, because it is a really big leap that you have to make in order to become an executive. And I wanted to help women to do that. And as a result, my bigger mission is, how can I help close the gender gap in leadership even a little bit? So that's what brought me here.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, well, we were talking about this beforehand, weren't we, Katy, that because tech is all about innovation, then a lot of people think that there's going to be quite a forward-thinking culture that goes along with that. And it's not always the case, is it?
Yeah. I mean, I've worked at some cool companies where it's like, hoodies and jeans or whatever, like innovative technology, and it had that tech vibe. And
Mhm.
still, I saw a difference in the way men and women were able to advance in that company. The
Mhm.
expectations for any woman that wanted to step into a senior leadership position. You've probably heard this before, but men are promoted on potential, women are promoted on experience. I saw this play out time and time again. And
Yeah.
so it's still a big problem.
Yes, well, it is a big problem, and do you think that there is something that women know that that is a problem, and so they feel as though they have to justify themselves in a different way, perhaps, to men? Because there's something that I've noticed, that men kind of tend to be more confident perhaps in those kind of, senior leadership roles. It's always, obviously, I've been a senior leader as myself as well in the media businesses that I worked in, and I think that I always felt as though I had to somehow justify myself. I've had to try harder. I think I always felt that. And do you think that is still the case today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I felt that way even before I was a leader.
Yeah.
Even being like a young female in biotech, I
Yeah.
noticed my first job that I was not taken as seriously as my male colleagues were. Right.
Mhm.
And it's really easy to internalize these feelings and being reacted to that way. And so,
Yeah.
we see the stats, all kinds of information out there on confidence with little boys, little girls, men and women. And generally speaking, women, we downplay our accomplishments. We underestimate our abilities, even though we perform at the same level.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and this even extends to, we're talking about moving into leadership. You've probably heard that, I think it's a Hewlett-Packard paper that talks about men applying for jobs if they meet 60% of the requirements, and women not applying until we meet 100%. So this kind of all ties together, in terms of things that can be holding us back.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very hard, I think, without having a mentor or a coach or some kind of a really positive presence in our life that actually is able to validate our reality, because we would sometimes say that and people say, oh, don't be silly, just really, it's your paranoia,
Yeah.
right? But it isn't. It's real, isn't it, Katy?
I mean, absolutely. So if I think about my career, I had a female boss for 5 months out of about 18 and a half years.
Wow.
Months.
Yes.
And then the reporting structure changed and I had to start reporting into the local management team. So that was gone. And I noticed that I was looking for a mentor, especially during the time in my career that I was really struggling. I was at a director level. I was trying to become a VP, and I was struggling to show up as a VP or to do whatever I needed to do to convince my boss to make me a VP. And I was looking for a mentor, ideally a woman who had
Yes.
been through what I'd been through. And full disclosure, I never found one. I didn't find one. And I joke about this. I tried to find this email. I couldn't find it. I don't remember if it was an email or a social message or what, but I cold messaged Sheryl Sandberg.
Oh, really? Oh, you said
Asked
so,
her.
but do you want to mentor me? Did you say that to her?
I think I said something like that. I mean, I was pretty bold. She never got back to me, or her team didn't get back to me, right? And she was
Oh,
already pretty famous at that point. But all that to say, I was kind of desperate. I was looking for someone who I could really look up to and maybe emulate a little bit, who had been through what I had been through, and it was hard to find. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting point, because I remember quite a long time ago, actually, somebody saying to me, look, we all need to have a role model, right? We're going to get into these situations in our lives, or particularly in our businesses, where there's a fork in the road and we don't know what to do because nobody is actually showing us the way. And we have to decide, do we do this or do we do that? And of course, as women, with this additional kind of component of, let's just say it's a male dominated environment. If we're working in those kind of environments, a lot of environments are male dominated. There's an extra dimension. And so it's like, well, how do we respond to the advances, perhaps, of unwanted advances of somebody who is kind of pretending to be matey, but we know it's not really matey, or somebody who's kind of dangling the carrot because they want that recognition from us as women, rather than necessarily it being a professional thing. All sorts of challenges that tend to come up.
Mhm.
And how do we actually respond to that? So what somebody once said to me is, they said, look, you need to say, okay, what would so and so do? So get this really powerful female. Beyonce, what would Beyonce do? What would Madonna do? What would, these amazing people who you look up to and you think, they're really powerful and they just have that thing. What would they do? But the thing is, that's okay to a certain point. But, we still need people to actually talk to about our specific challenges, don't we? It's not enough just to have that distant role model, is it?
Well, yeah, I think because you can visualize them and think to yourself, what would they do? But imagine having access to them and asking them, what do you think I should do? Or have you experienced this before? The power of that, whether it's a peer group or a mentor or whatever it is, or a coach, it is really powerful. When I think about who my mentors were, they were men
Mhm.
largely. And I think it's actually great for women to have male mentors and men to have female mentors. I think the challenge for me arises when women only have access to male mentors, right? And they
Mhm.
don't have access to someone who maybe has the same, shared lived experience as you mentioned, right? We might encounter different challenges than our male counterparts do. And I really noticed this, again, being a mom and an executive, which you don't find that a lot. Um, all of the men, the first executive team I was on, first senior management team I was on, every man on that team who had kids had a stay-at-home wife. And here I was like newly divorced, like, single parenting half the time. And
Yeah.
it was like, I have no one understands me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was also a single parent, and I think a lot of the time, it's there is more domestic challenges for women in senior positions because, this is all backed up by statistics. This isn't just a conversation that the two of us are having, and we're just all sharing our biases and, sort of saying, "Oh, men don't understand us," and all of that. There is many, many, proven statistics around, these kind of issues, and I know that when I was a single parent, I was in the same position. I was usually the only woman in the boardroom, and all of the guys, they had women at home, and they would be putting the children to bed and bathing them, and, so they had the support, and they had the wives, and I was the one that had to be like, "No, I can't stay late. I can't come out for a drink because I have to go home. I have to relieve the childcare. I have to put my children to bed, otherwise I'm not gonna see them." And actually, it is that juggling thing is quite hard. And Richard's saying, "Jane, think you're a fantastic mother." Thank you, Richard. Oh, that's so sweet. And Richard also says the biggest thing that holds women and men both back is fear and preconceived programming and conditioning. So do you think, sort of, just to pick up on that point, fear, I mean, obviously we all feel fear, but do you think fear is something that, obviously in those kind of environments, men are going to feel fear and anxiety and everything as well. Do you
Mhm.
think maybe they just respond to it differently and maybe they cover it up in a slightly different way, whereas they're feeling more vulnerable and maybe showing more vulnerability?
Mm, that's a good question. I know that I've spoken to lots of men that will say to me like, "Hey, I feel insecure too. I've got limiting beliefs too." And that's valid, right? And with the parenting thing, I think we should also just acknowledge the fact that there's single dads out there.
Yeah, yeah.
There's right? Anyone who's dedicated to their family and also
Mm.
trying to support their career is feeling this challenge. It's not only women.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but in terms of the fear, I mean, I guess I would take it back to that study, right? That I talked about, the
Mhm.
Hewlett-Packard study, where perhaps like men are just pushing through it more. Maybe it's more, maybe they're feeling the fear, but they have the confidence to still act,
Mhm.
right? Where what I see with a lot of the women I work with is the fear is holding them back. I think that's the
Mhm.
key, right? Like we all feel fear. When I launched my business, felt a lot of fear.
Yeah.
A lot of fear. When I started posting on LinkedIn, felt a lot of fear. Um, but the key was, how do I push through that fear? And so I
Mhm.
think the problem is not feeling fear, because hey, if you're going to try and live a life where you don't feel any fear, you're probably not going to achieve everything you want to achieve. But are we letting it hold us back, or are we finding ways to push through?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to realize that, we've got centuries of evolution behind us, haven't we? And it was really only a couple of generations ago that women didn't have a choice because we just had babies all the time. We didn't have control over our bodies. And so with that, what that meant, I mean, I know certainly looking back through my family tree is that, my female ancestors, they'd be having like 13, 14 babies, and most of them would die, so there would only be like 3 or 4 or something that kind of made it through. But you think about that was women's lives, for centuries. And so, from an evolutionary perspective, talking about sort of equality of women in the workplace and so on, it's not surprising that at times we feel discomfort and and some as if it's not our rightful place because it's all been kind of recent really in terms of our history as human beings, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think part of it is probably that. I think that the environment we're in plays a really big role as well.
Yeah,
There's
definitely.
there've been management teams I've been on where I felt highly valued, I felt supported, I felt like what I brought to the table was well accepted, and I was, I just felt great as being part of those teams. And then I've been part of other teams where I didn't really feel that. I felt a little bit like I didn't belong. Maybe I wasn't like the rest of the people on the team. And so
Yeah.
I think that some of that might naturally exist, but I do think we can overcome it. And I think it
Yeah.
has a lot to do with like creating an inclusive environment for all the different types of people that work there.
Yeah, well, exactly. And of course, this whole thing about diversity and inclusion is really big at the moment. And, I've had some of this in my own family because my daughter's actually got ADHD and she's had some struggles with her workplace recently. And so, we as humans, we come in many different shapes and forms, don't we? And there has to be, I think, an awareness of our differences, doesn't there? And it is a cultural thing, isn't it, really? So, do you think that that really there is an education piece, a sort of continuous education piece that needs to happen across all companies
Yeah,
about
I
this?
do. I do. And so I was a person who I had heard a lot about diversity and inclusion. But I really had only ever thought about the diversity part. And I think a lot of people think about the diversity part, right? They're like, "Oh, we've got a woman on the management team. Oh, there's an ethnic minority. Check." Like we're done.
Yeah.
And to me, we need to focus a little bit more on the inclusion, which means,
Mm.
are we setting people up to thrive in this role, right?
Yeah.
Are we setting up, are we allowing working parents the freedom and the flexibility to, really feel comfortable working and also picking up the kids or doing whatever they have to do? Or if there's individuals with different like religious, they belong to different religious groups, are we creating inclusion there in terms of giving them a place to pray or following dietary restrictions or whatever? So this was something that really like kind of hit me over the head. Maybe like a year or a year and a half ago, I was thinking about it and I was like, man, this is the missing piece a lot of the time, is the inclusion part.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say as a woman, being part of some teams and often being the only woman, I felt this because I was typically pretty vocal, hey, I've got a young family. It's really hard for me to travel on these dates, or doing overnight strategy sessions are really tough because I'm a single parent. And so when I have my kids on these certain days, I'm in a tough position. And it was often like overlooked, I would say, right? It was often, nods at the time. And then the
Yeah.
next strategy session is like Sunday to Wednesday when I had my kids or whatever. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of nodding, with people saying like, yes, oh yeah, diversity and inclusion, we're doing it. But where I see it fall down is on the inclusion side.
Oh, definitely. And I resonate so much with that because to be honest, I got to the end of my corporate career and I was like, I just can't do this any longer. I cannot do this because no allowances are being made. No, it's just this cultural thing that I was kind of fighting against, which was we stay late. We pretend that we haven't got families
Yeah.
that need us or that want us, because we pretend that work is what matters most at all times. And, you can really, really care about the job that you do, and you can do a fantastic job as a leader of an organization without it having to take over your life and actually, really ruin the experience of your family.
Yeah.
And I think that's it really, isn't it? And it is an issue obviously that affects men as well. But I think particularly in tech, because it's such a kind of fast-paced, kind of intense environment, it's just lends itself to that very sort of kind of work obsessed, long hours type of culture, doesn't it?
Yeah. I totally agree. Like I can think about tech companies that I've known where like they order in dinner for everyone. And the
Yeah.
expectation is everyone's staying super late. Like, maybe if you're 22, free dinner is worth that. If you have a couple of kids at home, getting a free burrito is not really worth me missing that time with my family. And the tech culture too. I mean, oftentimes there's a lot of sort of strategy sessions with hard partying and that kind of thing, right? Where again,
Definitely.
depending on where you are in your life and what your priorities are, that's not something you necessarily want to be engaging in. So it could be really hard to
Yeah.
push back, to set boundaries, to say no. And I mean, I was not always good at it. Full transparency. I've become like the boundaries queen, but
Yeah.
there were definitely times in my career that I was going along with whatever I felt I had to, because I thought that's what I had to do to belong.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of grew up in media in London, and it was very much the same. It was very much a kind of hard partying. Look, we work hard, we play hard, you know, and you know, everybody has, yeah, everybody kind of has drinks on a Friday, and the drinks never run out, and all of that kind of thing, which is kind of fun in a way, but it really, really does. It's fun for young single people maybe who don't have any responsibilities, but you know, you go beyond that, and it does kind of become challenging, doesn't it?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I found it tough. I definitely found it tough. And I would say a big part of me leaving the corporate world, the biggest part was my mission, right? The biggest part was I want to do
Mhm.
this thing. But I'm not going to lie, something that was really appealing to me was, oh my gosh, freedom over my schedule. Like, no one's going to tell me on Friday, hey, we're
Mhm.
pivoting. We need this new deck by Monday or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that letting go of that has been lovely.
Yeah, and you know, it still goes on. In fact, I was talking to a good friend last week, and he was telling me that his daughter was working for a company, and she booked in a holiday on Monday, and they gave her like a pitch deck to do on Friday, and said, well, it has to be ready for Tuesday morning. You know, kind of knowing that she'd taken the weekend off and she'd taken the Monday off because she had something special lined up. And it was kind of like, yeah, you know, look, we are this kind of company, you know, we produce, we overachieve, we do what other businesses won't. But really, you know, it doesn't work, does it?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of the perpetual. I remember many times in my career, um, telling someone in my life, maybe my partner or maybe, my ex, probably, this is it's connected, 6 more months, it's gonna be crazy for 6 more months, and then I think it's gonna let up, or like 2 more months, 1 more quarter, and it never does at a lot of these companies. It's the same. So, I think what I tell a lot of my clients is, it's not up to your boss to create the boundaries in your life. It's up to
Yeah,
you. And so that's hard, right? It's like this idea where oftentimes people will tell me, I'm totally burnt out, I'm overloaded,
yeah,
my boss just keeps giving me more.
yeah.
And the hard thing is, the only way that you can stop that is by creating firm boundaries and sticking to them. Super scary. Often it's scary to implement those. But if we want to protect our own mental health, sometimes that's just what needs to be done.
Well, it is really, or of course, the other alternative is to start our own businesses, which is why there are so many kind of, you know, female entrepreneurs who are absolutely kind of smashing it out there at the moment because, you know, we really appreciate the freedom, don't we, of that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about your business, Katie. You know, what is a typical project for you these days?
Yeah. So I have two main offerings. I do a group program, which is, I love this. It's my passion. And the reason that I made a group program was, finally, when I was an EVP, I had the opportunity to join a sales leader peer group.
Mhm.
And it wasn't even all women, it was actually mostly men. Um, and it was game changing for me. Like, having a group of individuals who are in the same boat as me, we
Yeah.
could share our challenges, we could support each other, we could share what's been working for us, like, was just invaluable. And I realized, like, I appreciated it so much, but what I really realized was I could have used this 5 years ago, 7 years ago,
Mhm.
and it was just never something that was available to me. And so one of my missions, when I joined that peer group and realized how valuable it was I'm going to somehow bring this to the world. Like, I want to create these groups. And so I've created a group, a small group, for women who want to break through the executive level, which includes me sharing frameworks and tools and knowledge and all that kind of stuff. But then it also pairs it with a peer group environment. So it's
Mhm.
cohort based. So it's always a small group and the same people together. And people can really, like, share and bond and support each other through the journey. So
Mhm.
that is one of my main offerings. And then the other thing I do is one-on-one coaching. So I work one-on-one with women who are either executives that are not showing up the way they want to, right? So, hey, I have this great job and life and I'm miserable. So, okay, let's get into that. Or women, again, who are on that cusp of breaking through and they're plateaued for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And then the other thing I do is I do some speaking engagements. So I now do paid speaking engagements as well, which is largely, again, to help women. It's always to help women level up and create the careers that they want to create and advocate for more women in leadership. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really, really fantastic. And, when you were talking about your groups and so on, I was thinking, that would have been so amazing for me as well, many years ago when I felt so alone. And I think the wonderful thing about it is, as you said, just that kind of peer support really, isn't it? It goes a long, long way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there is, of course, always a very good reason, I think, to actually aspire to be a leader, and, to get to the highest level in any kind of organization. I mean, I am an ambitious person, so I always wanted to kind of do that anyway. But when I actually got there, I thought, you know what? Life is a lot more interesting now. I thought, yeah, there are challenges, but in terms of the quality of the work that I was doing and the things that I was learning, it starts to get really interesting when you're working at a very high level and when you're working at board level. I think it's a lot more fun. And I think that is the thing that, I that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on the podcast because I think sometimes there is a misconception that, oh, you climb up the, career ladder, you get into those senior board level positions, the EVP positions, and life's going to be really, really hard. Yes, the pressure is there, the responsibility, but also along with that, there is more freedom and there is more fun, I think, once you've kind of smashed it. Would you agree with that, Katie?
I totally agree. There's a lot of talk right now. It's very popular to be an entrepreneur, right? Or to be a solopreneur.
Yeah.
And I like to remind people that there's a lot of value, working in companies as well.
Yeah.
I loved being a leader. I loved being a
Yeah.
senior leader, actually. So I loved managing people, but what I really loved, like you, the further up you go at an organization, the more you get to kind of do the fun stuff of like, okay, how does this puzzle fit together? How are we going to win? Like, what is the strategy? How does my org need to be
Yeah.
structured for success? Like all of that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And so when I decided to eventually leave, I was actually quite torn. Like I spent
Yeah.
months really like thinking on this and this decision because I was like, there were a lot of elements of leadership that I loved and senior leadership in particular. So yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot to be said. I would hate for this trend of people going out and starting their own thing to mean fewer women get the opportunity to move into senior leadership.
Yeah, and I think the important thing for people to understand about entrepreneurship is that, particularly if you have been a senior leader in an organization, which you have and I have, is that it can come as quite a shock when all of a sudden you've had that support structure around you. And I know when I was running my business, really, I say I never had to do anything. I mean, of course I did, but I had people to do everything that I didn't want to do. So I was like, I had the teams around me the whole time. And as an entrepreneur, we have to recreate that freedom and that luxury, but on our own terms. And I think it's important never to forget that because when we start our businesses, obviously we're in the solopreneur, space, and we're having to do all those things for ourselves that we formerly delegated to other people. But it is our responsibility to get out of that space as soon as we can and actually get to that point where we're really enjoying our lives again and we're doing what we do best. And I
Mhm,
think whether it's in, a corporate role or whether it's, as an entrepreneur, we have that duty to ourselves, don't we, Katie?
mhm. Oh, I totally agree. I mean, no one wants to spend time doing things they don't enjoy doing, and
No,
generally speaking, we are better at doing the things we enjoy doing. So,
definitely.
it's good for us, it's good for our clients or the company we work for. The big thing I have embraced in being a solopreneur is what things might I have not done before, but I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So a big thing is I really realized that there was a whole creative side that I wasn't really getting an opportunity to really lean into. And so like I kind of joke because on LinkedIn I get a lot of messages of people that maybe want to offer services to me. And I will never hire a ghostwriter. I think ghostwriters are great for people who want one. I think they can add a lot of value. But for me, I've discovered a love of writing. And so that's not
Mhm.
a thing I want to outsource, regardless of where my
Yeah.
business goes. I just know that that is a thing that I love blocking off a couple of hours and just writing.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas contracts, I've already outsourced. That
Yeah.
was gone. Some administrative stuff, those were things I immediately got taken off my plate because I don't enjoy them. I know I'm going to dread them, right? And I'd rather be using that time with my clients. So I think that getting to know ourselves, what are my strengths? What do I
Mhm.
enjoy doing? And to your point, getting us out of the things. Yeah, when you first start, you have to do everything. I was like, building everything on my own and doing things that I hadn't had to do in a lot of years. Um, but as soon as you can get out of that and really focus on the value you really bring, the better.
Yeah, definitely. And I was actually listening to a podcast myself today, which talking about the importance of, in the early days, investing in your own business and actually plowing some of your profits back into getting that resource and getting that help so that you can, have a great life, because ultimately your business is there to support your life. And we have to be the architects of our amazing businesses and lives, as I often say. And, really the lovely thing about entrepreneurship is that, no one's fitting you into a box, right, of their making, that you do actually have the chance to define your own life, your own goals, your own values, and really how you spend your time. But you have to be intentional about it, right?
Yes. And I think another element of that for anyone that is out there that might be starting their own business, I noticed there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people talking about what they're doing, and you have to
Yes.
also ask yourself, is this right for me? And
Yes.
so, there've been individuals I've spoken with, and I'm like, oh my gosh, should I be like hiring for this and this and this, and should I be launching this? And so I have to come back to my plan, what I know is my sort of mission and vision, and recentering on that so that that noise kind of quiets down.
Yeah, exactly. And, there will be women that are listening to this, and probably, guys as well, they're at that point where maybe they are ready to leave corporate life and actually take that leap into the world of entrepreneurship. So I think all of this is really valuable advice for them. But what is it that you would say, Katie, was your biggest lesson in terms of making that transition yourself?
To entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Oof, what was my biggest lesson? You know what? The biggest thing I would say is that the fear does not equal reality. So,
Yeah.
and closely coupled with that is people might not get it, but they don't really care what you do, right? So I would say a lot of what was holding me back was fear,
Yeah.
but it was fear of like, what are people going to think? What are people going to think? I'm an EVP and I'm quitting to be a coach.
Yeah.
What are people going to think of that? And, so obviously my point is that people aren't really thinking about you. But the truth is, some people in my life didn't get it. And they made that kind of clear to me, right? Like, wow, you're out to lunch. We don't understand.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to kind of like be okay with that, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm doing this for me, and maybe I'm going to look somewhere else for the support that I need.
Yeah.
Um, because it's a vulnerable time, right? It's a vulnerable
Yes.
time. You oftentimes are working through a lot of things when you're making these big decisions. And so, just coming back to why am I doing this? Having that faith and confidence that you're making the right decision, regardless of what's happening around you, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think of course when we move, jobs, if essentially when we're building our career, people find that easy to understand because, you know, we're stepping from here into here, and it's nice for them, isn't it? Because it's reassuring. It's like, oh, you know, Katie's doing this and now she's doing that. When we start our own businesses, I think we do often face maybe not necessarily outright hostility, but certainly a lack of understanding and sometimes judgment
Mhm.
from people close to us, and it can be quite painful.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, it is you're so right, because nobody who starts their own business is stepping into that ready-made thing that has that reassuring predictability about it that a job or a career actually does. So, you know, we all need support at that time as well, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing who you can look to for that support, I think is
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
so do you also coach, women that are making, that transition, as well as ones that are, you know, they are moving up through the glass ceiling and into those leadership positions? Would you also be working with people who they're like, "Do you know what? I actually this burning desire inside me has just got too strong, and I'm gonna make that big leap."
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely do. So it was never my intention to. And then these women ended up finding me, or we started working together on the premise that they wanted to move into leadership. And then they actually decided through our work that their real passion maybe was in something else. So yeah, I love working with those kinds of clients too, because when you see somebody really start to step into what maybe they were meant to do or what their deepest
Mm.
heart's desire is, it's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Katie, what's on the cards for you then over the next few months? You said you've got a plan. So, what's your kind of, you know, what does it look like?
Yeah. So I'm running more of my groups. Like I said, the group was something that initially I put together for corporate um, companies, corporate clients, where I would run it for their staff.
Yeah,
So in January was the first time I opened up for the general public and got
yeah.
my first cohort, and it's been amazing. So I'm actually scaling that up a little bit, where I'm going to probably start 2 cohorts in the spring, and I've got a few speaking engagements, and I've got a bunch of clients. So yeah, it's more of the same, really. Um, I'm also, in terms of my business, starting to grow up a little bit in my business, because it's been less than a year, actually. So
Wow.
I left. Yeah, I told my CEO that I would be leaving in December, but I stayed through Q1 last year just to help with the transition. And I went down to 3 days a week to start building my business on the side. And so I
Uh-huh.
officially launched my business April 1. So I'll be coming up on my 1 year anniversary. And so I built my website myself on Squarespace because I was like, I'm crafty, I can do this.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing now, just with, you know, the types of clients and engagements that I'm seeing, that I could probably let a professional take that over. So I'm getting that redone, and potentially even looking at some other offerings that I'm gonna add later on. So those are kind of just like in the early phases.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think, again, actually creating offers and putting them out to market, it is an iterative process, isn't it? Because as we work with clients, and I've certainly found this in my business, we learn more about our marketplace, and our marketplace is dynamic as well. It's always changing, and so that thing about refining our offers, creating new offers, tweaking, you know, changing maybe the tone of some of our communications in order to improve our message to market fit, and all of those kind of things. It's all part of the creative aspect, I think, of entrepreneurship, but it can be very, very rewarding once we've kind of got the hang of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I realized in revamping my group program and offering it to the general public, it is now what I always wanted it to be. So
Ah,
I think previously offering it to corporate clients was probably maybe not the right thing. I just see the women coming in now, like the energy of the group and everything is just amazing. So I completely agree with you. I love the idea of an iterative process. One, it's less pressure to do it perfectly on day one.
Yeah,
Two, you learn with everything you do. And I mean, I'm a
definitely.
certified coach, but I do continuous coach training all the time. I'm
Yeah.
always
Mhm.
learning like new techniques, new ways to do things. And so I can incorporate those into my offerings as well and always just make it a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly, because if we don't invest in ourselves, then why would we expect other people to invest in us? I think that thing about continuous professional development is very important to me as well. And I'm constantly, I spend a lot of money on kind of trainings and mentors and coaches and so on in order to make sure that I am right on top of all the most cutting edge stuff that's coming out in my particular niche,
Mhm.
because it's worth it. It just makes you much stronger as a professional and as an entrepreneur, and, means that you can serve your clients so much better, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan. So I have a business coach. I have a coach, like a life coach who I'll
Yeah.
bring anything to.
Yeah.
I'm in a coaching, like in a ongoing coach training program right now. I'm part of a women's mastermind group. Like, so I do a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, be wary of a coach that doesn't have a coach.
Oh, definitely,
Right? So if you
definitely.
believe in it, you should invest in it. And so I am a big fan
Absolutely.
of investing. And I can say, certainly for myself, I get such a return on every dollar I spend investing in these things. So I've seen it
Absolutely.
firsthand. Yeah, I think it's so valuable.
Yeah, it's just all part of the process, isn't it? And I think, as you said, people that invest in themselves, they really stand out. You can just tell the difference, I think, because they're just smarter, they're just more forward thinking, they're just more kind of aware and three-dimensional. And yeah, so I totally agree with you that it's important to do that, really, and to put those profits back into your business and put them back into yourself to make your service as powerful and as strong as it could possibly be, because ultimately that's what's gonna carry you forward, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because when I left the corporate world, I thought at that time, like, I think I've got everything I need to start helping people, but then I keep learning more and more and more, right? So it's yeah, it's pretty amazing actually. I love I'm a big believer in self-improvement, continuous self-improvement. But I completely agree with you. I think individuals that invest in themselves, they are the ones that kind of stand out from the pack. Whatever that looks like for you, right? Maybe it looks like a coach, but maybe it looks like reading a lot. Maybe it looks like
Yeah.
meditating. It can look like all kinds of different things. But to me, the common thread is investing in yourself.
Well, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I'm also so passionate about the power of podcasting, because I mean, I'm not just a podcaster, I'm a vociferous consumer of podcasters. I absolutely love podcasts, and every single day, I usually listen to an episode. I just love them, and I think, isn't it amazing today that we have access to all this amazing, thinking from around the world, and that you and I are talking. You are in, was it in Canada?
Ottawa.
Ottawa, that's
Yeah,
right, Ottawa. Yeah, you're in Ottawa, and here am I just outside London, and we're having this great chat, and it's perfect. Yeah.
it is
So
amazing.
so look, it is. Yeah, it really is. It still just kind of blows my mind, really, the power of it. Yeah, and also what we were talking about before, which is all the people from around the world that listen into podcasts, and how, I was talking about how my podcast trends in all these places like Ghana and Sri Lanka and Venezuela and all these kind of amazing places, and you think, that's really cool. That's so cool. I love podcasting. Yeah. So, anyway, Katie, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me tonight. What an incredible conversation we've had. And I also wanted to thank Richard, because, he's been there all the way through, putting loads of comments in the chat. And it's all really nice when we can actually see some engagement. So I just wanted to thank you, Richard. He always shows up, nearly always shows up, and he's always got lots of nice things to say. So, yeah, it's been great. So, Katie, if somebody wants to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so like I said, I post content on LinkedIn every day. So that's an easy way to learn more about me and what I have to say. And so I'm on there just as Katy McFee. And there's my picture, so you'll know it's me. I also do a free newsletter that you can sign up through my page. And my website is insightstoactioncc.com. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. Apologies for that. But you can find it all through LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has links to everything, to all my free resources, to getting a hold of me. All of that kind of stuff can be found there.
Well, that's amazing. Well, again, Katy, thank you so much for joining us. You've given incredible value to our audience tonight, and really look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.